present Make Your Monday, our monthly presentation about Japanese crafts, cosplay, accessories, and more. I'll give people a couple minutes to come on in because it's a Monday. Everyone's a bit sluggish. I understand. But let's see, we do have about 7 people here. That's fantastic. We'd really like to encourage you guys to chime in on chat. Feel free to ask questions tonight, say anything you might want to say to me. Remember, if you do not have a Twitch account, you cannot actually comment live, but Twitch accounts are completely free. So feel free to hop over for a minute, sign up, and then come back and you can comment. You'll see me in chat as Kintsugi style. We also have a moderator or 2 available during today's broadcast. We really appreciate you guys, the moderators behind the scenes. Thank you so much. Today we are going to be talking about Sashiko, but before that, I'm going to give us a bit of a recap on last month and also what we're doing here in general. So I am Julianne. I am one of the presenters of Okashicon Online. If you're not familiar with Okashicon, we are an anime, Japanese fashion, gaming, and women in pop culture convention here in Central Texas, based out of Pflugerville, which is in the greater Austin, Texas area. And because of COVID-19, we have switched to being primarily online this year. And you are now on our Monday night event, which happens on the 2nd Monday of the month, which is called Make Your Monday. And that's where I am a fiber artist and craft instructor, will be teaching you various things about Japanese crafts. Other activities that we have throughout the month, on the first Saturday of the month, we have anime afternoons, which is where we're revisiting classic and new anime. That's a bit more of a classic thing. We normally have this in person at the Alamo Draft House over in Mueller in East Austin. But of course, because of the stay-at-home orders and the small gatherings, well, no gatherings of a certain size restrictions that are in place in Austin through, I think, March of next year, we are having those virtual. So thank you so much for coming. And those are continuing. Those are the first Saturday of every month. The second Sunday, which was last night, we have demo disc Okashicon version, which is where a couple of our guys are playing classic demo discs, which are the freebie discs that you got for PlayStation or PCs and other video games. They give you small tasters, so it's a bit of a nostalgic flashback. Maybe you've been watching High Score Girl anime a lot, and you want to have some Mortal Kombat time, something like that. Demo disc Okashicon edition is the place to be. So remember, second Monday of the month is here with me on Make Your Monday. This month we also have the J Fashion Roundtable. Please see the Okashicon Facebook page for more information. That will be on Zoom, not Twitch. And then the 4th Sunday of the month at 2 p.m. Central Time. So we have 2 evening events and 2 afternoon events. Anime afternoons is an afternoon, demo disc Okashicon and Make Your Monday are in the evenings. And then on the 4th Sunday of the month at 2 p.m. Central Time, which is unfortunately in the middle of the night for Australia, Japan, and some of our friends international, is Japan Stories. And this month I will be talking about Japan's markets and temple sales. So it's going to be a perfect bridge between what we're talking about tonight with Sashiko and we're talking about next week on this broadcast, which is Boro. So in between there, you'll see actually where I bought a lot of stuff for next month's broadcast on Boro. If we have any people who were with us last month for Kumihimo, if you guys had any questions, concerns, comments, want to show me your projects, anything like that, feel free to give a shout out in the chat. If you guys would like for us to start some kind of discussion group, I know we're kind of active on Facebook. We also have a lot of members on Discord and Twitter. But if you'd like to have some place where we can talk about these things after the event, certainly we have our YouTube channel if you want to. But if you'd like to have a more formal, structured way of communicating with other people, let me know. We're happy to set things up, whatever is comfortable for you and our audience. And we really hope that you can learn from these activities and give you something to do. We're all trying to stay healthy, and unfortunately for a lot of us it means staying at home. So that is the monthly schedule for Okashicon Online. We did have a big event in July, which we're still slowly putting up on our YouTube channel as well. So that is Okashicon, spelled the same way. If you got here to our Twitch, and you can see it on the banner, oops, sorry, over there. That's how you spell Okashicon. That's how you can get to our YouTube channel, and we will have all of Okashicon at home, which was our virtual convention, is going up on our YouTube channel as well. And we had pre-con activities too. So hi Raina, good evening to you too. Glad that you're back again. I know there's some familiar faces who are going to be here, so please feel free to chime in. We really appreciate it. Remember that if you are an Amazon Prime member, you can get a subscription to our channel for free, or any one channel on Twitch for free, and not have to see the ads. We're going to try not running an ad break in the middle of tonight. If you guys do get ads in the middle, please let us know. We think you won't only see ads when you first tune in, but that's a bit of an experiment for us, so do let us know how that's going. And the final sort of announcement thing I have is that for links and notifications of the next show, remember my name is Julianne, that is spelled with 2 N's and no E. So you need to contact me. I am on Facebook at Facebook/Julianne. I'm also Julianne at Gmail, and I'm Julianne in Japan on Instagram and other places. You'll see my contact list later in this program. You can get in touch with me, and I can send you information in advance. It's also on the Make Your Monday or Japan Stories pages on our Caution website, so you'll always know what's coming. And except for, I think sometimes around the Christmas holidays, when we're not going to have Japan Stories December, generally speaking, our schedule is going to be set for the rest of this year. And then we'll reevaluate in January as we go along. So hopefully there's no more questions about last month's Kumihimo. I was going to say that if you guys would also like next year, July, hopefully we'll be able to have that in person. If you guys would be interested in a Japanese things swap meet, this will come over when I talk the flea markets and my excessive textile collection that I do need to whittle down a little. But we do have various like swap and trade events at Okoshikon for like anime and fashion stuff. If you'd like Japanese things, you know, other generic Japanese stuff, let me know and we'll get that in the schedule for you. So I think that's all of the sort of preliminaries that we have. I just want to remind you guys that I am an amateur. I am a craft instructor, but I am not an expert. I have not trained extensively on any one of these techniques. I may have taken classes from experts, or I may have taken classes in Japan. But the only thing I am a true expert at is buying stuff. And when we switch to my lower camera, you will start to see this is just one small assortment of my stuff. So yeah, buying supplies is the only thing I'm really, really, truly good at. But I'm actually going to switch to my other camera now, because instead of showing you, see, I told you so much stuff. We'll get to all of this throughout the evening. So buckle up, make sure you're hydrated. It's going to be, I think, hopefully an interesting and entertaining evening. But for the first thing, I want to get you started with some stitching. I know I normally go through a presentation and I talk to you about the history of things. Don't worry, that's all coming. It's absolutely all coming up. But for now, I want you to start practicing. I want you to get going. I should have ironed my fabric. I didn't. I'll be honest with you. Quarantine's kind of got me down, and I don't want to make any more effort. You can use any type of light colored cloth that you may, solid colored cloth. If you don't have a solid, if you have a print and then you turn it over on the back, that may be solid on the back. So that might work for you. But grab whatever your fabric is. In this case, because I think it'll show up on camera better, I'm going to use a dark colored fabric. But go ahead and grab your woven cloth. I'll explain in a minute why you want woven. Hopefully you have some kind of woven. And of course, I understand there's going to be a lot of you who are going to want to watch this and try it out later. You're going to want to watch the whole thing first. That's totally cool. I do that myself all the time. But I know some of you do like to play along, so that's cool. If you are, get out your, now in this case, I don't have any specialist Sashiko stuff. This is just rare black fabric. This is a pearl cotton. You can use an embroidery floss. I brought a whole bunch of things to show you, but you just want a contrast in color. That's all you need at the moment. I need to move my list of instructions out of the way of the camera so I can see what I'm doing. Some scissors just to cut your thread with. I mean, whatever's handy. And this is just a standard, I don't know if you can see it. This is just standard hand sewing embroidery needles that I got at a dollar store or something like that. I don't know. Made in Czech Republic, sold in Republic of China. I don't know. Just generic hand sewing embroidery supplies. So you just want to get yourself, find the end. Is that not always the hardest on some of these things? I'm just going to cut off a piece because I don't really need to know where the end is. get yourself about the length of your arm. So if you can see, got to get used to where this new camera position is. Thank you, Akashikan. We do have a new improved camera system. Hopefully it won't go blurry on you quite so much as it was last month. But get about the distance from your hand to your elbow, roughly. You know, this is not rocket science here. Unlock your scissors if you have fancy scissors like mine with a lock on them. Cut it off. Then remember, get your needle out. You don't really want to thread your needle. If you're not familiar with this, let me teach you something that's going to change your world. You want to needle your thread. That means instead of trying to put your thread through the needle, which I can do, takes practice, but you know, it's often easier if you're trying to stick the needle onto the thread. In this case, because I cut that kind of bluntly, you do need to go ahead and retwist the thread a little bit. You can always use a needle threader, anything that makes your life easier. It's totally fine. You can lick it the traditional way. Anything that'll help you get this through the eye of the needle. Now, I will say when we start talking about Sashiko needles, as opposed to embroidery needles, they do have a slightly bigger eye, or you can get ones with slightly bigger eyes. And so it can be a little bit easier to thread. But yeah, you want to stick the needle and the thread near each other. I am not wearing my reading glasses, so it's a little hard for me to see. Got part of it in there. Is it good enough? Should have done this off camera so y'all aren't wasting your time. Actually, now that I think about it, I do have one over here. That's already pre-threaded. I'll spare y'all a little. There we go. Huh. There was one I had prepared earlier. I'm going to say that because this is practice. This is absolutely just practice. This is not, we're not doing a pattern. We're not doing a design. I'm not tied in this. I'm going to cut that knot off because it's really easier to do this when you can unpick the stitches that you don't like. So you've got your solid colored fabric, woven fabric. You've got your contrasting color of thread. Now, just for a moment, I'm going to switch over to a piece of graph paper so that it's easier for you to see. We're going to practice the particular type of stitches. I have such a tiny desk and so much to show you. That's why it looks like the store exploded on my desk. And honestly, I have been to some stores that have less than I do. But just so that hopefully you can see a little better. I don't know if you can tell that is graph paper. You don't really need to know that this is graph paper to be able to see what I'm doing. Your typical Sashiko stitch is a regular running stitch. I'll show you again when we get to back to the fabric in a minute, but I'm just going to do this on paper. You can, it's now zoomed in on the fact that this is graph paper. Your top of the stitch, this part of the stitch is going above the fabric, is about 3 times longer than the bit that's underneath. So imagine this is going over the fabric, then you're going under, you're leaving one space that is 1/3 the distance of the longer stitch. So your stitches are going to look something like this, and probably just as wobbly as mine, to be perfectly honest. This is about the ratio that you want. So you can see each stitch is about 3 times as long as the bit underneath. Now, again, remember the fact when I said I am not an expert, my stitching is also not very good. The only thing that you really want to make sure you're doing, this is what matters in the end, is you want your stitch to be long, the gap in between the stitches. So as long as this bit is longer than the gap in between, it's okay. It's far more important for you to be consistent than for your stitches to be size. So as long as each stitch is roughly the same size as the other stitch, and as long as each gap is roughly the same size as the other gap, you're golden. I am not that good. So bear with me. You also may notice I do not have a hoop. There's no embroidery hoop. It was not an oops on the supply list. You do not use an embroidery hoop in Sashiko. You apparently do use cat hair because boy, you can totally see cat hair under these lights. Again, I will show you later. Yes, you can turn off my face camera. Let me turn that off so that y'all don't have to see that part. Sorry, just getting a little bit of notes from our director in the background. I will show you later how you will actually on the back so that you don't tie a knot, or if you want to tie a knot, just ignore that for now. What I want to do is I just want to get you practicing the stitch, and then you guys can sit there and practice the stitch while I'm working, while I'm talking about other things. So again, in this case, because you don't have anything knotted, you just kind of want to hold on this stitch in your finger. And then again, the size of the stitch doesn't matter to begin with, because you're going to need to practice big stitches, little stitches. They're all the same. It's the ratio of the stitch that matters. So I'm going to try to do this pretty big so that you guys can see, please see. So that's a really big stitch I've just taken. You can kind of see how I'm laying the needle on top of it. I'm then going to continue to bring that needle up. That's about 1/3 the distance. I'm going to go and make another big stitch. I'm not pulling the needle up out of the fabric at all. I'm going to make sure, again, I don't know how well you can see. I'm going to raise this up to the camera and see if that will focus for us. I don't know how well it will. But where you can see the needle is where the thread is going to go. So where you see the silver reflecting, that's where the white thread will be. And where you see the black, that's where it's going to be on the other side. The way Sashiko is made is by running a whole bunch of stitches on your needle, and you're folding the fabric back and forth on this thing. Now, if you were being a particularly good, embroiderer, you would probably be watching exactly where this line is going. You would be watching, you might have had it drawn out, or you might have the fabric being held taut by another device that I'll tell you about later, which I've never used, so I don't know. But you'd be paying more attention than I am to where exactly this line is running. But this is practically matter. Then what you do not pull the thread. I should pull the needle and thread out of the fabric. No, you don't. You hold the needle and you pull the fabric off of it. Pull the fabric off of the thread. And then you pull the thread until the tension is approximately right. And then you straighten it back out again. So I'm getting the tension back on that side. And as you can see, my line is not straight because I wasn't paying very close attention and I don't have anything marked out. That is okay. This is your practice piece. You're going to keep doing that. And hopefully you'll keep, again, you're going to try to go the stitch back down about the same size stitch as the others. And you're just going to keep making these lines and filling up your cloth over and over. Again, try to get as many stitches onto your needle as you can. You don't have to worry about them being straight. You don't have to worry about them being perfect. It is learning the rhythm. It is learning how to cram a bunch of stitches onto your fabric. That is part of the process. If you've done hand quilting, or maybe you've seen some of this absolutely genius little lady quilters who've been doing it for, about 150 years, it seems like. And they can get so many tiny little stitches on each needle before they pull through. That's the same sort of thing. So if you've done hand quilting, it's incredibly similar. So I want you guys to keep working your stitches. Keep trying to get your line straight if you can. If you can't, don't worry about it. So that should be fine. We're going to switch over to my slides now. So I want you guys to keep doing this. If you pull the needle out, so this is a good question. If you pull the needle out, honestly, the needle won't tug very well. So if you are, let me put this back in. If you're trying to pull on the needle and you've got a whole bunch of fabric on there, you just got a lot of tension and you're just going to have to pull really, really hard. And you've got a lot of tension on the thread. So it's just more difficult for you. It's not wrong. It's just harder. That's all it is. Also, if you don't like this, now I doubled my thread. If you have doubled your thread and you just had, a little bit left over on this tail, you wouldn't have to cut off. You could just go in and pick the stitches back out. But say I don't like any of these stitches at all. I'm like, that line looks terrible. I'm embarrassed. I don't want to show you guys. Because there's no knot, you can pull the whole thing out. You can just, nothing there to show you anymore. Let me show you what it's like if the needle isn't doubled. So say you've got a normal thread tail like this, which is how more people are accustomed to embroidering. Also, by the way, if you were using DMC floss, like 6-strand floss or whatever, don't separate it. Just use whatever you've got, whatever's fastest to get yourself going. Right now, this is just practice. But I'm going to sit here and do some more like really terrible stitches. And I'm going to tell you right now, they're going to be awful. They're going to be wonky. They're going to be something just unpleasant to look at. Look at that. They're just a mess. I can go in. I can pull the needle off the end of the thread. I can pull that one out. That one, to me, that just looks terrible. And there you go. You can rethread your needle. I know that takes a while, but I happen to have cheated. And when I switched, I actually switched to a needle with a bigger eye. So it won't take me quite as long to rethread. But, you know, the reason why I made sure that you did not is so that you can pull things out. If you're just totally and completely embarrassed by the stitches you make, do not worry. I can't do it well. I have some cheater ways that I, you know, can make it look better. Honestly, after you're done and you iron it, sometimes that helps things a little too. But I want you guys to keep going. I'm going to switch over to some slides now. Actually, I'm just going to double check my list. We're going to switch over the slides. I'm also going to turn my other camera so that you can see my face a little while I'm talking. And then I'm going to turn off this crafty camera for a moment. Can I meet? Oh no, I can't. I can't turn off the crafty camera. So you get to see this giant mess. Oh, there we go. Thank you very much, director. I'm gonna now go through. Oops, I was starting. No, I started at the beginning. I thought I'd screwed up and I hadn't. I'm just telling y'all, it's Monday. It is totally and completely Monday right now. And feeling. I was supposed to be in Japan this week, and I'm a little sad. My birthday's coming up. I'm supposed to be studying samigi weaving in Niigata this week, and that's not happening, and I'm bummed. So I'm a little bit behind the 8 ball at the moment, but hopefully I will still be able to teach you everything and more that you have wanted to know about Sashiko. So I'm going to start with the slides. Y'all keep stitching. Ask me questions if you've got them. Keep stitching, because practice is what's important. Learning that tension, learning that stitch spacing. If you don't learn anything else today, is you well on your way during Sashiko embroidery. So again, remember today's Making Monday. This is Japanese Sashiko embroidery basics, and I mean the basics. This is not, you're not going to have a finished product at the end of the day, but you will know how to do your first project. This is a sample of Sashiko that I saw in a flea market in Tokyo. You can't quite tell because it was a huge futon cover, so red, but this is actually like a starburst pattern. So I just thought it was kind of cool because it's a very antique example of some Sashiko. Now, if I had been this wonderful and professional and really on the ball person, I would have showed you some samples of my work. I can't find them. And the samples that I could find were pretty terrible. So I was embarrassed to show you. But here are some samples from teachers instead. So she does really lovely work because she's been at it for 15 years. But just so that you know what Sashiko looks like, it is a basic running stitch embroidery. It is in geometric shapes usually, although modern Sashiko can be any kind of line art as well. And I will be showing you samples of that too. But traditional Sashiko is just geometric shapes. And I don't know about you, I couldn't doodle as a child. I couldn't draw like cute animals or faces or anything. I could just do geometric shapes. And in fact, the pattern that I'll be teaching you last today is what I used to doodle in my notebook all the time. And I didn't realize that that is a several hundred-year-old Japanese motif. It's quite simple. Obviously, I don't think I was channeling a several hundred-year-old Japanese samurai or anything, but you'll see some of these are quite basic motifs. Some of these are very reminiscent of things that you see in nature, and others are just very simple patterns. But that is it. For those of you who were just like, what have I gotten myself into? Why am I here? What are we doing? This is fun to achieve. I'm just going to make my window a little smaller for a second while I do that so that I can still see the chat window. Whoops. I'm going the wrong way. Ah! There we go. First, I'm going to come over here so I can see the chat window. Okay, y'all haven't said anything. Remember, you can stop me at any point. Make comments. Tell me about your experiences with Sashiko or your experiences with embroidery, anything like that. So I am here, guys. Let's do this as a live session as opposed to just you watching me stumbling around on YouTube later. So back to the slides. Brief history of Sashiko. First off, I am not pronouncing that weirdly. Although it looks like Sashiko or Sashiko, in Japanese, the letter shi, which is just one character in the Japanese alphabet, that I kind of disappears a little. So Sashiko or Sashiko with a very short version. A lot of people in America will pronounce it Sashiko, and Japanese people will cringe very badly if you do that. It's okay if you do it at the beginning, but hopefully by the time you've heard me say it enough times today, it will kind of sink in for you. Sashiko, I love the name. It means little stabs or little pierces. I love that concept. That's why I do needle felting. Sometimes I want to stab things, especially right now. We're all a little bit stressed. This is peasant embroidery, to be as blunt as I possibly can. This is what every farm worker's wife, let's be honest, usually the women, would do in the wintertime. This is not the highly ornate, expensive home shishu that you may be familiar with, like kimono, that are just elaborately, gorgeously made with silk embroidery and gold threads and things like that. That is not at all what we're doing. What we're doing is a simple running stitch. This was made by peasant people to decorate their everyday clothing, or more importantly, to mend their everyday clothing, or to bind two pieces of cloth together. Their extant pieces go back to the Edo period, so you're looking at the 17th century. That's not probably when it started, or we can find pieces that still exist. Remember, these were peasant clothes, or they were like cleaning cloths or padding that were worn under armor, very practical everyday things. So things just didn't survive. Again, the farm workers would mend their garments. They would patch their clothes with these things. This is why we're studying Sashiko this month, and then we're looking at Boro and visible mending next month. Boro is kind of popular and hot and trendy right now, especially among American collectors. The Japanese are mortified by it because we are paying thousands and thousands of dollars for their rags. They really don't understand us. I really don't understand us, but they're happy to sell it to us. But in order to know how to do Boro, you have to start with Sashiko. So this is what every little girl who was not of a high status would have learned. Everyone in the household in the wintertime had to do work when it was too busy to work in the fields. And so the women and girls would have been mending clothing, would have been making clothing, would have been adding on patches. They would have been putting two pieces of fabric together so that you could get more warmth. And these basic running stitches were how they would do it. So originally they were just sort of straight lines, nothing fancy about it. We'll go back to that one first piece, just plain straight lines. And then they got more geometric shapes as time would go on. And now there are regional varieties. So some of these would be from like North Japan, others would be from some of the islands. So most of the time they do know where they've come from now, although some of them are just so widespread that they're not quite sure where they originated. Now, another thing that is important is that Japanese clothing back in the 17th century period was mostly made of hemp. And so if you can look over on the side of your screen at the moment, the left-hand side, you can see me and my t-shirt. And this shirt that I'm wearing is actually a Sashiko pattern called Asanoha, or hemp leaf. This is probably the most famous of all Sashiko patterns. So we do need hemp as in the clothing type. We do not mean, certain psychotropic drugs, but hemp was the most basic type of cloth that was in Japan. And cotton was being introduced at this time period from India and from South Asia. But the quality of the cotton that was coming in was not so great. And so because people were still hand weaving at the time, hemp came very long fibers, long staples. So if you know anything about spinning yarns, you know that the longer is, especially if you need really hard, long wearing clothing. And very short, like cotton, just don't hold together very well, especially unless you've got a lot of industrial type twists. They didn't have the processes to make cotton into very strong fibers yet. So cotton was used for threads, for sewing things together, and for embroidery, as opposed to for weaving with. But cotton was actually much more thermal. It had more warming properties, so it was much better at retaining body heat. So they wanted to add as much cotton to the outside of their garments as possible to keep the garments warmer, and also to hold 2, 3, 4, 5 layers of fabric together so that you could get more warmth. So maybe you would layer up, you know, some older rags on the inside of a jacket, just that these people who are out fishing and farming and doing types of hard labor out in the cold could stay a little bit warmer. Now, you may think of quilts, you're like, well, how is this different from quilting? It's not really. The only thing is in the West, we have a very specific definition of what a quilt is. There's 3 layers of fabric, 2 layers, and then some kind of padding or wadding on the inside between them. That will be your thermal insulating layer. When we're talking about Sashiko, anything goes. So it could be 2 layers of fabric being held together. It could be 5, 6, 9 layers of fabric, whatever they had. It could be huge pieces that are being held together, like blanket-sized pieces, or it could be just a bunch of patches layered on top of each other. So there was no right or wrong, no rhyme or reason to it. It was what they had, whatever they could do. They wanted to make themselves look interesting, but they also just really wanted to stay warm. So normally it was made with coarse fabrics, so coarse hand-woven hemps. Normally these fabrics were dyed with indigo because that was the only dye that was permitted to commoners. So there was an imperial edict, lasted about 300 years, and not in Okinawa and the Ryukyu area, which was not actually part of mainland Japan at the time. It was the Ryukyu kingdom. It had a separate ruler. But for the kingdom of Japan, again, not including Hokkaido either, because that wasn't part of it, but for the other 3 main islands, most of what we think of Japan now, if we're not familiar with all these other islands that are, you know, go to the north and the south. But 300, 350 years, they could either wear undyed clothing or indigo dyed clothing. Now, oops, and I have a typo, undyed thread, I meant undyed thread. So a lot of people say, oh, well, was it white thread? Was it off-white thread? They didn't really bleach the cotton, but at the same time, the cotton could have been left out in the sun. It would have been pretty bright. So by the time we're seeing things that are off-white, often that's more dingy because of many years of use and washing and things like that. So it was maybe white because it wasn't a bleached cotton, but it would be a fairly light color, and that would show up very brilliantly against the dark indigo colors that people were wearing. So if you don't have any questions about that, I think that's probably the least interesting thing I have to say today is the history of Sashiko. So let's move on a little bit. One question that I do get asked is, what is the difference between Sashiko and Kogen? If you were with me last month, you know that I recommended a book about Kogen. That is another form of Japanese peasant embroidery. And to be very technical, Kogen is a subset, and they both kind of mean peasant embroidery or low-class embroidery. But Kogen is more of a satin stitch, a counted satin stitch, like you see on the left. And Sashiko is more of a running stitch. That's the real difference. They don't tend to be in the same, using the same garment. Apparently, the Kogen was developed so that you could have more cotton on the outside and have more thermal insulation. And it was a way so that you could have a layer of cotton, but not rely on that for the warp structure of your garments. It wasn't holding your garment together. It was just decorative on the outside. So apparently they used to have Kogen mostly on the tops and the jackets and the places that wouldn't wear quite so quickly, and Sashiko embroidery on the trousers, the skirts, and the lower half of the body, things that would wear out need to be patched and replaced more often. So they would be in the same outfit, but they wouldn't necessarily be in the same garment. However, Sashiko has been popular in the United States for about 15 years, and Kogen is the next big thing right now. So 2 years ago, there were no books available on Kogen, and now I think the 3rd one is coming to market this fall. So it's really the next level. So Sashiko is where it's really becoming popular. It's, I mean, 6 months ago, in the last 6 months, and again, in the next 2 months, I think there's about 9 new books coming out, whereas there used to be about 5 on the market, and now it's kind of exploded. Probably because people expected that we were just finishing up with the Olympics at this time of the year, and people were going to have kind of like Olympic fever and be interested in Japanese cultural thing. Hopefully they'll still be interested next year after we've finally had the Olympics. But yeah, so Sashiko, it's been kind of trendy. It's available. You can buy it in the United States. You can buy it in Australia. You can buy it in the UK. You can buy it all around the world. I will get to suppliers later. Kogen is the next step up. And it's actually a little bit easier to do. So I don't feel like I need to teach you a whole lot about it. And again, some people would ask me what's the difference between Sashiko and Boro. And Boro is the way of mending things using Sashiko stitching. So hopefully you have that in your head. We're learning the stitching today. And again, if you don't learn any of the patterns, hopefully you're all sitting there and you're still practicing your stitching, right? You're still working on that. Your sort of 3-to-1 ratio. Is it still getting in your head? If not, just at least try to remember 3-to-1, or get yourself some graph paper and just kind of get an eye for what it looks like. Stare at some of these pictures later and kind of get an eye for what the gaps and the spaces look like in between the threads on top. At least if that's all you do, you'll still be ready for Boro next month. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about sources. I highly recommend that out of any of the books that you may pick, and there are about 15 on the market right now, that yes, Raina, the running stitch is really difficult when you're not used to it. You think that's easy. It's in and out of the fabric. It's up and down. It seems so incredibly simple, but it's relying on muscle memory, really. And it's learning the tension. It's learning just, you know, how hard to pull the fabric so it doesn't pucker up. Sometimes you just stop and stretch things out, yank on the fabric again, just to make sure it's laying flat, laying smoothly. It just, honestly, it's just practice. It's not something I've done a lot of, because I got really gung-ho about Sashiko about 3 years ago, and I thought, yes, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go to Japan. I'm going to Sashiko, I'm going to buy all the supplies, or it's going to be cheap. It's going to be fantastic. I'm going to do this while I'm watching TV. And it's been about 3 years since I've watched anything in English, so I can't be sitting there stitching, looking at my fabric, and reading subtitles at the same time. So I've gotten very little Sashiko stitching done since I kind of started watching things in Japanese. But to go back to what I was saying, sources. There are a lot of sources out there. There are 2 books that I'm especially going to recommend, and I'm going to show you why. The first is The Ultimate Sashiko Sourcebook by Susan Briscoe. Susan Briscoe is basically the grande dame of Sashiko in English. She's based in the UK. She used to be an English teacher in Japan in the 1990s, where she first learned Sashiko. She wasn't terribly interested. She's kind of like, okay, that's nice and all, but you know, I'm a quilter. I can kind of appreciate it, but it's not really. Went back again in 2003 and took a really intensive class, and from then she really started doing a deep dive into the history, learning the regional variations. And so she has about 5 books out on Sashiko, and then a brand new one in Kogen that just came out that I don't have yet. But honestly, this book here, The Ultimate Sashiko Source Book, is the #1 book. If you're going to buy one book and no others, I really recommend this one. I really like this one. And the 2 images on the right are why I like this one. You may see on the top right that looks like a diagram, but then there's these little red arrows. That is what is called a stitch diagram. It's telling you in what order do you stitch the lines for the most efficient and effective way to work through the pattern. The second image, the one below there, is actually an image that is from her video series, which you can get from Interweave Press, where she has stitched all of these lines in different colors, so you can follow the pattern. Now again, that's the Asanoha pattern. That's the pattern that is on my shirt. I'm not going to show you how to draw that out, because that's the one she does in all of her classes, and it's kind of her signature. If you want to draw an Asanoha pattern, she already has a class out there. She's taught it in multiple different versions, and she's done this wonderful example where, you know, all the stitches left to right, you know, she's got one color in yellow, and that you can trace the yellow up and down. See, that zigzags through the pattern. I think she's done a really great job of breaking some of these patterns down, so that not only can you copy them, you can see how they would be stitched in an efficient way. And that is, to me, the difference between a great Sashiko book and a decent Sashiko book. The next one that I'll recommend is, and I just found out about this 3 or 4 days ago, is called Japanese Running Stitch Sashiko 85 Traditional Patterns from Beginner to Advanced. This is by a Japanese person. There's very little in it that is instructions, and most of it does have little arrows in there. Now, one really cool thing about this book is if you do subscribe to Kindle Unlimited like I do, and you can check out the books as many times as you want, this is on Kindle Unlimited. There are 2, maybe 3 Sashiko books on Kindle Unlimited at the moment, but this one I think is definitely the best out of those. It literally is 85 different patterns and how to stitch it, and there's not much more to it than that. But once you learn the basics of how to stitch, what you're really looking for is the patterns. So yeah, especially, like I said, if you're not paying anything for it, this is only the one that for it. But if you're going to buy one, then Susan Briscoe's Ultimate Sashiko Source Book is absolutely my favorite. I also have another one I'll show you in a minute. Probably can't see terribly well. It is Sashiko by Mary J. Parker. This is actually for machine embroidering or doing free motion stitch Sashiko, but it's very similar. And once I switch back to my other camera, I'll give you a bit more of an insight into this book and why I like this one. But it's a little bit different than the other two because the other two are specifically for hand Sashiko, which is what we're all doing. And this one was more kind of getting on the free motion quilting bandwagon. I think the book is about 10 years ago when free motion quilting was the hot thing, in especially in modern art quilting, or modern quilting as it's called. A couple more recommended resources. I've already told you about the books. There are some video series. So again, Susan Briscoe has done a series of videos. They're now, I can't remember the original publisher's name. They got bought out by Interweave Press, which is then got bought out by F&W Media, but interweavepress.com is where you can purchase them right now. Also, I would say all of Susan Briscoe's books on Sashiko, not the Kogan one, are all very similar. I found that a little bit disappointing. She kind of would have the same projects in the different books. She had different publishers, and they were kind of just repackaged the same material. So that one book has everything in it. If you kind of get tempted, like, hey, I really like that one, maybe I'll buy her other one, you may be disappointed like I was. She has a video. Carol Ziogas, will also be mentioning later down here. She also has Lauren Taylor, and she's a friend of mine. She has a introductory how to go on her YouTube. I believe her YouTube channel is Kimono Momo, but it might be theartandthread.com. I know that they're all linked from theartandthread.com. So you definitely find her, like, sort of 4 very, very basic, talking a very basic introduction. And then she also on iQuilts.com has a more comprehensive Sashiko video. I think that's about $50. And then if you happen to subscribe to either Skillshare or Creative Bug, which are subscription-based services that have art and other things. Yeah, we do apologize for sound and video quality. Mine is really acting up today, and there's nothing I can do about it. It's been about 3 days now, and all I can say is it's Monday, and I will do the best I can. If I do completely cut out on you, I will switch to my hotspot, but then lose video quality for the sake of audio quality. So it's just, unfortunately, both of my options are not great right now, and I don't have one of those fancy load balancers like those really key people who do Twitch, like, out roaming around and they have like 5 mobile phones, and yeah, I don't have that. Sorry. But we do appreciate your patience, and hopefully maybe we can at least get some of this on the replay if you missed it the first time, because we've got 2 different servers that we're pinging through, because we're going both through the one server. We're getting all these set up, and then it goes to Twitch as well, and then it's also going to YouTube, and so there's a little bit of delay. But hopefully, you know, if you miss something, maybe it'll get caught on the recording. You can go back and see it later. So anyway, Skillshare has a bunch of different things that you can learn. I mean, there's programming and all kinds of different classes. And then Creative Bug is more just art and craft type things. They are annual membership subscriptions. I think they also have monthly as well. But they both have some Sashiko embroidery on there. I prefer the Skillshare a little bit, but honestly, the Susan Briscoe and the Carol Ziogas ones that you purchase individually, I think, are better video classes. places where you can purchase online. So Kimono Momo and Snuggly Monkey are on Etsy. So you can ship, they ship, I don't know if they ship anywhere in the world, because with COVID going on, there's been a lot of shutdowns from various countries not accepting shipments from other countries. So I don't really know what the situation is with that, but I know that they used to ship anywhere in the world. Also, if you are here in the greater Austin area, we do have a shop called Bunny's Designs. It's now by appointment only. But she does have a shop. She does sell Sashiko supplies and other Japanese fabrics and is here. And she also has an Etsy shop. So if you're not wanting to go into a store right now, you can certainly order off of her and still shop local to the Austin area. For people who are in Australia, because I'm hoping some of my family made it today, there is a wonderful website called BB Bold or Bebe Bold. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. They are out of Lismore, New South Wales. Lismore, New South Wales is basically the middle of nowhere, but it is an amazing shop with the most incredible Japanese fabric. Like, they have better sources than I do, and I go shop in Japan, so I'm not sure where they're getting a lot of their vintage fabrics from, but they have amazing supplies. And so yeah, if you're definitely, I know they ship worldwide, Australia Post and DHL permitting. Some brands that I'll just quickly recommend. I'll get into that more, start showing you the specific examples of things, but Olympus, you may be going, isn't that a camera company? Yes, it is, but they actually make the most Sashiko supplies. They are a very multi-talented company that have their hands in a lot of different cookie jars. I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that they make a lot of different things, not just electronics. You may be familiar with. They have the needles and patterns. And again, I have some of their examples to show you. And then Clover, which if you do any kind of sewing, hand sewing, quilting, etc., you are probably familiar with Clover. The other thing I will also say is Daiso. Yes, we're still waiting for them to open in Austin. I guess they're still waiting to hear what's going on with COVID before they announce their opening date. Daiso does apparently make some basic Sashiko kits. I cannot confirm this. I know somebody who has purchased them. Well, actually, Anita, if you're watching, hi. I remember you said that I think your granddaughter bought some up in Dallas. Every time I've been to a Daiso, I have not been able to find one. However, I do have some thread from Daiso that I can show you. So when we get a Daiso in Austin, I don't know what we're going to get. I don't know if maybe the Sashiko is sold out. I do have a Kogan kit from Daiso. So I know they're still making the Kogan. I honestly am just not sure about whether they're still making Sashiko other than the thread. So maybe Daiso, but certainly they're the cheapest. It's $1 for the kit, and it has, you know, everything that you would need: the 2 colors of thread, the stitching, everything. And then just to round off my recommended resources list here, the blog, The Ardent Thread, that's Carol Ziogis's blog. She has been taking a break due to COVID. Normally she travels a lot, and that's what she posts about. And I think a lot of us are just not really motivated at the moment, which I totally understand. 2 last resources. Now, please remember, these are all to be on our website afterwards. I will be handing these over to Melissa so that she can put these, the book names, the shop names, and these 2 URLs up on our Make Your Monday page, so you don't have to worry about writing this down right now. These are just 2 free Sashiko sites that I happen to really like. They've got, I think, between 35 and 50 different patterns that are free. Also, you can just, you know, go in your favorite search engine and type in free Sashiko patterns. But these 2 had a particularly good selection of very traditional ones and modern ones as well. I'm just going to quickly finish up here with the slides and then go back to showing you the rest of this stuff. Y'all know I'm long-winded. I thank you very much for being with me, but yeah, I'm still going. If you're in Japan, I'm not seeing Lester Caney cosplay with us tonight, but she will be agreeing with me on this. So obviously, if you're in Japan, the place to shop is Tokyo Hands, which again, Tokyo Hands is what my autocorrect wants to change it to. It is not. It is Tokyo Hands after Tokyo department store. But if you just go look for Hands, they'll send you to the right place. It is the everything you've ever wanted 8-story craft store, and then they have them, maybe not 8 stories, but 5, 6, 7 stories in other cities outside of Tokyo as well. And then also So here's the exciting one that I didn't know until my most recent trip is Okadaya. Okadaya is the fabric supply and sewing supply store that, oh, sorry, just saw Daiso is hiring in Austin, so they're definitely coming. Yay, I can't wait. I mean, I can wait because it's COVID, but I'm really excited. Anyway, a wonderland. I have been to Napori Fabric Town, and I still completely dropped my jaw when I was in Okadaya. I'm going to show you a little bit here. You can see from the photo on the top right, there's just a tiny little sign. This is right smack in Shinjuku. If you can see the building kind of, oh, and they announced sorry, I'm just jumping all over the place watching the chat. Daiso announced their grand opening is going to be somewhere in like late October, beginning of November. They announced it in Virgo. You guys probably heard it here first. I know I heard it here first. So excited. Maybe we should like start a petition for them to have their Sashiko and Kogan kits here. I think y'all would go buy it for me, wouldn't you? So just so we can get more Sashiko supplies in Austin. Anyway, back to Okadaya. Shinjuku, you will see in the tiny corner of that building, the big kind of like white building behind that one, that is actually the main Shinjuku station. So this is just outside of the Shinjuku train station. I think it's the east end of it. I can't quite remember. Is a tiny little sign for a very big sign, the CAL, that's Calzonia, that's a sock shop. That's on one floor, and it's got a huge sign, but Okadaya is 7 floors, like, across 3 different buildings. Now, its main reason for being in Shinjuku is because it is the place where all of the Tokyo Fashion University students shop. So it's mostly garment making, but as you can see from the selection on the left, they have a lot of Sashiko patterns, they have Kogan patterns, they have really cool little mannequins. I love the guy with the thread head thing. He has another little friend. I didn't have room to show you all of them. They are just so fun and funky. And yeah, they do tax-free. It is very, very dangerous to your wallet, especially if you cosplay or anything else. If you're into garment fabric, yeah, it's dangerous. It's as dangerous as going all the way to Napori Fabric Town, especially if you're into notions, if you want to make corsets. Oh yeah, very specialist sewing supplies you can get there. So they also have really nice selection. So this is almost the end of my slides. I'm just going to remind you guys that Make Your Monday is, as I've said, always the second Monday of the month. Next month is Boro and Decorative Mending, which is very popular among upcycle and reuse people. Again, you have a small sample on the right of just one of the many pieces that I saw. They look like rags. They really look, no one knows why we bought them and spent so much money for them. They are rags. But that piece there was about $3,000. So that is what it looks like. And if in between tonight with Sashiko Embroidery and next month of learning Boro and Decorative Mending on November 9th, you want to learn more about these markets where you can buy them, do remember to come back and see my show about markets and temple sales and thrift stores and things like that. That will be on Sunday, September 28th, I think. I don't know. I'll come back to that later. I'll definitely give you the date before the end of this presentation. Then contact me if you're interested. You might just screenshot that because I'm going to roll on through this because we've got so much more to cover and it's already been less of an hour. But again, y'all know that I am long-winded. So I appreciate you being with this. But can we switch back to the craft camera now? Hey, crafty cam. Is it there? Yeah, we got it. Okay. So I'm going to turn off briefly the other camera because we're having bandwidth issues. So if you see some things go blank, ooh, and we have some random spammer for the first time. I feel like we've made it to the big leagues that we have a random spammer. Okay, let me pull up my list of things that we're actually going to go through. You guys are still stitching, right? You're still stitching? I hope you're still stitching. It's a lot like hand quilting, isn't it? I forgot to mention things about changing directions. So I'll get there in a minute, because when you change directions, you need to leave a little tail, because otherwise when you pull, it can get a little bit too tense, too taut on you. It can pucker. But I'll show you that in just a minute. I'm going to show you just a little bit inside this book. You don't really need to know anything. The only reason why I like this book in particular, even though it is machine quilting, is it does teach you more about the history of where these patterns have come from. And all of these books, like the Susan Briscoe one, they do also give you some things, some activities to do. Sorry, there's a bit of glare on there. That's a placemat. Some pillowcases, sheets, other projects, the ways that you can use the Sashiko. I know you can't really see very well, but yeah, that is Sashiko by Mary S. Parker. Honestly, if you're only going to buy one book, again, I'd stick with the Susan Briscoe one. It's not really that important. The reason why I had you start your sewing with this plain fabric, this whatever fabric that you had, and whatever thread that you had, was because, like I said, I'm a shopaholic, and I really, really, really thought I had to have all the right stuff, you know, that it wouldn't work unless I had exactly the right thread, exactly the right needles, and I just want you to see that's not true. I will show you in a minute what the correct things are. When I say correct, another important thing to note is that unlike some traditional Japanese arts and crafts, this is not a precious technique. This is not national treasure level. Honestly, if they're selling kits at Daiso, it's not the kind of thing that they're really fussy about. That's just kind of a general tip as far as recommended that, you know, people in another country are doing it slightly differently. Let me just show you how you change directions, because I forgot to do that. I'm sure if you guys have been going back and forth, you have already changed a different direction. So just assume that I'm coming up here and I'm going to go back the way I came from. Put that thing back where it came from. I'm actually doing this on the top just so that you can see. Well, no, I didn't do that on the top. When you turn around or turn a corner or have a loop of any kind, do a jump, whatever it is that you are doing, any reason why you might change directions in your fabric. I'm just going to pull this out. Remember, pull the fabric, not the needle. If you unthread your needle, that happens. Don't worry too much. You'll see that this did a weird thing. So what you didn't want to do was have a jump go on a diagonal. I don't know if I did that slowly enough for you to see what I did. If I pull this a little tighter, you'll see I went on an angle like that and then started stitching this direction. That is what you do not want to do. Let me go ahead and if you've done that, don't worry. Again, this is your practice piece. No one's going to be looking at it. If they are, you can pull the stitches out and pretend you didn't do it. It's really not going to upset anyone. And the important thing was that you get your stitch shape and size correct. See if I can, you will, you will have to thread your needle a lot. And now I'm embarrassed because I have to stop. You have to watch this. Feel free to ask any more questions while I'm in doing this. Let me see how many of you guys are still here. Have I bored you all away? I think we've definitely still got 9 people watching. I am so grateful to have you guys here. I have a little competition going with some of the other hosts, although they don't know it. And I always get higher viewership than them. So I'm always thrilled by that. I'm also pretty quick at threading a needle when I'm actually paying attention. So let's just ignore whatever that was. I'm going to have a big jump stitch at the end just so that you can't see. And I really unthreaded that. Okay. That is the biggest problem with if you're using a multiple strand floss, is that getting your strands that are slightly separated unintentionally can get you in a little bit of trouble. There we go. Then even when you cut your tails, they're not lined up. I know, it's the pressure of doing it while someone is watching. If I'm sitting here chatting away and not really paying attention, I can usually get it threaded pretty quickly. But if someone is staring at me, waiting on me to do it, and like, hey, the entire universe wants to know how well you can thread a needle. See, the moment I start talking, I can do it just fine. So back to pretending that I'm doing this stitch in the normal way. You want to make sure that your needle goes down into the fabric. So when you're changing your direction, the needle is on the back side. Okay, again, ignore the fact that these are totally not straight. That doesn't matter. But your needle is down on the back side. Even catching weird things, yeah, that was a big oops, but oh well. That part here is where the thread is coming up. Ignore that huge mistake that I just made. Then you're going to move to where the next row is, so that your jump stitch, if you've done other types of embroidery, where the jump from one line to the next is, it's on the back. So this is your loop where you're jumping. You want to leave that loop a little loose. You can always pull it tighter, but if you pull it tight right there, you will get puckering in your stitches. So now when I go back and start the next line, I do not have that diagonal stitch. Like you see there, I had a diagonal stitch because I didn't jump all the way to where I wanted my next row to go. And now when I pull through, and I'm pulling the fabric, holding the needle steady, I am not pulling that completely taut. I'm leaving an extra loopy bit on the back. Does that make sense? Basically, the most important thing is the tension on the front. If you have loops and weirdness on the back, unless you are making a furoshiki, which is double-sided and will be seen on both sides, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to temporarily take this away. I told y'all it's a mess. I'm going to temporarily take this away so that you can see the difference between, actually, I guess I do need the black here so that you can see some of the thread. The difference between American supplies or Western supplies, I suppose I should say, it's not really the correct term, but the stuff that we would normally use here in the United States versus the stuff that you would get in Japan. So this is a pearl cotton. That's what I was using for. It is multiple strands together. It's about the same size as a Sashiko thread, but you can definitely tell there are two strands and it has a little bit of a bump to it. This one is probably a Valdani. No, it's a Sullivan's. But I definitely have like Anchor, Valdani. This is a DMC Pro. It's an Anchor Pro. I'm hoping that you can see the texture on here. Let's see. Yeah, that's got little lumps and bumps in there. I don't know how well you can tell. The lights are so bright that you lose some texture on it. Not seeing any comments, so I hope that you guys can see it. Anyway, the reason that people will choose a pearl cotton is because the Sashiko thread, I'm going to pull out one of the Daiso Sashiko threads. So this one is called Merry Hobby. Look at that. Merry Hobby. I have never heard of a brand like that, but that is what you get when you're buying two huge strands for $1. Merry Hobby. Merry Hobbymas, everyone. This is a proper or Japanese Sashiko thread. And when you look at it, it is a single ply, tightly twisted thread. So you may see there are different weights of Sashiko thread as well, I should point out. So this one is thicker than this one. This one is thicker one. So you don't need to worry about how this looks like a bigger thread. it's more that this one is definitely, the pearl cotton is definitely 2-ply, and this is a 1-ply, or it's a very, very, very tightly woven. The reason why they used to use this tightly woven thread, it's a little bit closer to a thick hand sewing thread than an embroidery floss, is because it would wear better. If you were using this on your workwear and you had this decorative, loosely spun, pretty little fabric, it would twist and come unraveled. And then as it came unraveled, these threads are more fragile. And again, eventually the wear and tear would cause these threads to break. Whereas a tightly spun thread, like a Sashiko thread is, and again, I'm sorry that you can't get a better idea of the texture. I really don't know how to show you when it's not in person. That is one of the disadvantages of trying to do this virtually. Sashiko thread is very tough. If you try to break a pearl cotton, you're not quite breaking it. Like, I can't pull it apart, but if I untwist it, which of course now I can't do now that you're watching, if I untwist it and pull the two threads apart, each individual thread will be much easier to break. And that's why once it rubs on your clothing, it rubs on the things that you're doing, each individual thread, well, I will give up because y'all don't want to sit here and watch me breaking thread. Each individual thread will have a lot less tensile strength in it. And that's why this eventually will wear off and wear away. That's the main difference. I have a floche cotton, which is also used in embroidery. This is, again, it's more tightly spun. I would probably pick a floche cotton over a pearl cotton if I had to choose between the two of them, which one I was going to do for traditional embroidery or for traditional Sashiko. But the important thing is, unless you are making this for a work garment, it doesn't matter. Yeah, the thread knows I'm streaming. The needle knows I'm streaming. My hands are actually peeling, which they were not doing just an hour ago. I did use hand lotion. And so, yeah, there's all the things that can go wrong will go wrong because it's a Monday. But hopefully you guys being here is going to make your Monday. Maybe not mine, but make your Monday. Isn't that a terrible pun? I love it. That is the main difference between what a Sashiko thread is like. They come in a variety of colors. Let me see. Here is the sampler that I got from one of those shops, Snuggly Monkey. Snuggly Monkey is based out of Durham, North Carolina. This whole sampler, I think, was about $25, and it comes in 13 or 14 different colorways. Some of them are variegated, some of them are solid colors. There's a little bit of everything in here. This is a medium weight Sashiko thread. This is a fine weight Sashiko thread. And then this one, which I believe this company is called Maito Design Works. It is hand dyed in Japan, and I believe Kimono Momo is the exclusive importer of it. This is a heavyweight Sashiko thread. So if I pull these 3 different types of thread out, maybe you'll be able to see the difference between a lightweight, the heavyweight. This is like a thin yarn. If I pull this too much, it will mess the skein. But I'm not sure if you can tell just how much thicker this is. This is a multi-strand, but it is spun so much more tightly that this is not going to unravel on you while you're wearing it. But those are the 3 different types of Sashiko thread, but when you're ordering online, they're not usually going to say medium weight thread. They're just going to have a shop name on them. So this was, remember, Merry Hobby, the dollar version of it. This is Olympus brand, again, made by the camera people. This is Maito Design Works. I have another brand here somewhere. It's not terribly important, so I'm not going to have you guys wait, but this is one that I got at this beautiful variegated. That is also a medium weight. So I'm going to say the stuff that you find in the shops in Japan is more often the medium weight. This is going to be the most common for you to find in the United States as well. This is a 20-meter skein. This is a 40-meter skein. So your price variation may just depend on how much is actually in there. And then your hand dyes obviously are more expensive, the same as hand-dyed embroidery floss is anywhere. That's always going to be more expensive. But again, if you're making a pillow, you're making a wall hanging, you're making a furoshiki, you're making anything that's not going to get daily hard labor use whatever you have. Don't let having the right or the wrong thread or the right or the wrong fabric, I really, those should be in air quotes, they're not wrong. Don't let having a non-traditional version of something stop you from getting started in this technique, because the more you can practice, the better off you're going to be. I will talk now a little bit about the difference in needles, because again, there are so many brands, they do different things. I wouldn't worry about it. This is a Western, I mean, made in the Czech Republic, but sold out of South Carolina. I don't know, probably got it at Five and Dime a long time ago, or Joann's or whatever. This is just an American Sharps. That's got a smaller eye. This is a tulip Sashiko. It comes in this little box like this. This is called a big eye, straight, thick size. The real difference is going to be the eye size. You also can get much longer Sashiko needles. I can't recall if this box is a longer size box or not. Let me open it up and find out. Yep, that's a little bit longer, but these aren't the full long ones. The longest one's actually another 1.5 centimeters longer than this one. So obviously, if you're doing a piece that has a lot of long runs on it, the longer needles means you can get good 15, 20 stitches on your needle before you start pulling your fabric off of the needle. The shorter ones are better if you have a lot of curves in your work, because you're going to need to stop and change direction more often. But I have, so that was the tulip needles. I don't even remember what brand that is. That's an Olympus brand. This is a Clover brand. They're slightly different, and everyone's going to have their favorites. I think this one here was an Olympus, but this one's actually bigger still. Let me pull that out, because this is probably the biggest that I know where it is on hand. Can you see that? How much bigger that needle is? It's got a really huge eye. That would be suitable for the large size thread. You don't want your thread to be getting cramped in the needle eye. That's why it matters, because otherwise it will rub and cause distortion of your thread and can cause things to fray and unravel more quickly than you need it to. But that is, it's a very personal difference. Like the thread, the needles, some people like thinner thread. It's all going to give you a slight different variation, but there's nothing right and there's nothing wrong about it. So I hope that you can know that you can buy these. You can buy them in the United States. You can buy them at the shops that are listed, but you don't have to. Really, if you don't learn anything else today, I hope you can take that away with you. Let me also show you quickly the Sashiko thimble. Is a very different beast to a quilting thimble. Usually a thimble is worn on your fingertip or your thumb, just depending on how it quilts, and it helps you push with this part of your finger, especially if you're doing quilting on an embroidery hoop. You really want control with your index finger or your thumb, and especially your thumb can help you really shove it through tight spaces. When I do bead weaving, I'm definitely using a thimble on my thumb as opposed to my finger. But a Sashiko thimble is called a palm thimble because it sits, oh, I've got it upside down, here. It sits in the palm of your hand. You have your needle. I don't use these a lot. I didn't find them helpful. That was one of the reasons why I said if you did have additional Sashiko supplies, I would not use them yet. I can't even show you this easily. You've got little divots in here for the end of the needle, and then you're holding it. So this is steady. This is like not moving very much up against your hand. And then you can be rocking it in and out of your fabric much more quickly because something is holding it in there. You can now see I was able to throw a bunch of stitches on there quickly. This is a place where it would be easier to shove the needle through and pull the needle out rather than having to pull the fabric. But often these are made out of metal. I find them very uncomfortable. I don't like them. I personally don't use them. They go back in the package every time because it's not my thing. So I don't want you to feel like you have to have a Sashiko palm thimble. I certainly don't like them. You have to have these specialist, adorable little snips. They're cute and all for snipping your threads. If you saw my thing about Japanese cutting tools and knives and stuff, maybe you saw some of these. It's just neat because they're all one piece of iron, but you know, your Ginger scissors, your whatever, your embroidery scissors, your little stork scissors, whatever, they're going to do the same job. Do not worry about that at all. However, this is where things are going to get different. We will be showing you how to design and write your own pattern very briefly. I don't want to get hung up on that. I don't want you to take forever. But what you can buy are the pre-printed patterns. I'm going to open some of these up because I think you can't see with the lighting here. You will see that I have an absolutely ridiculous number of patterns on my desk that I have not even started stitching. And that's not counting the ones that I've stitched and then misplaced upstairs. One of the things that people in Japan really like, and I'm with them on this, is instead of having to transfer their embroidery design, you can just buy it. It's already on the fabric, and this is wash away. I'm hoping if you've done any other type of embroidery, your mind thinks lightly. You're going, what? Wait, it's pre-printed in wash away ink. So there are cheaper companies. I know that when the Daiso kits have it out there, it's pre-printed in regular ink. It doesn't wash away. If you don't line up your stitches exactly on the little lines, it's going to show forever and ever. But these ones from the major brand suppliers, so Olympus and Tulip and this one here, which I don't, QH Textiles, these are all going to wash away. They say that you just kind of dip it into the fabric after you're done. Sorry, dip it into water after you're done, and then the water will wash it away. But they also warn you don't use a steam iron because even just the steam can cause it to wash away. They're usually sold in the same size. It's got 2 segments on it. So remember, all this is going to wash away, but this is your stitch diagram. Put it right side up. This is your stitch diagram. This is a fairly simple key motif. And then once you've finished stitching this, you fold the 2 sides together. And as per this diagram here, you then turn it into a pillow cover. And then you'll sew along these outside lines, wrong sides together, obviously turn it inside out, stuff this, and all of these little pre-printed things generally become either a placemat or a bag or a pillow or some other cute little project for your home decor. So you're not even just stitching and then going, what on earth? This brand does not have the instructions on this side, but just so you know, again, I said traditional style was an indigo, but as you can see, I've got pink, I've got green, I've got white. It really doesn't matter. Whatever you want to do, it's completely up to you. So my personal choice, because I'm lazy, if y'all don't know that by now, you haven't been paying attention. Because I'm lazy and a shopaholic, is just to buy my designs pre-printed. That is the huge difference in the stuff that you can get in the shop and then just having a piece of fabric that you would then work on. They have modern designs. So this is a design based from the country Hungary. This is one which I may not show because that was going to be a gift from someone who may be watching. I won't mention that then. This has cherry blossoms. I love my sakura. I don't know if you can see because of the reflection. No, that camera really wants to zoom in and out. I don't know that it's much better with all these lights on or not. Let me see if I can move this down a little. I'm probably going to ruin everything. Yes, I know that just went totally out of focus. Is that going to give me any better? No, not really. It's a difficult situation here, trying to get you enough light so that you can see, and then also letting things focus. It just does, it's the plastic. It doesn't like doing that. So hold on a minute. It's going to come and go. I'm going to move this back up again. I'm going to make you dizzy again. So I apologize. 1 second. Let me raise that back up there. And no, it doesn't want to raise back up. Okay, lesson learned. Don't mess with it in the middle of the broadcast. There we go. Okay. Nope, don't mess with it in the middle of the broadcast. I really need to. Thanks, producer. My apologies. You guys can talk amongst yourselves then. I have no idea why this is. Oh, there we go. There are too many adjustment pieces on this. There we go. Okay, I think we're back now. There we go. Sorry. New technologies, y'all. Okay, I think I'm going to stop showing you my exciting purchases because that's not what you're here for, is it? I'm going to show you how you actually draw the designs out yourself because you haven't bought these awesome gadgets that I have. I'm going to stop gloating for a minute and a half. Okay. Let me look at my list and make sure that I have, yep, I have one thing to show you, and that is going to be how you would actually do the marking. But first, let me go back to this monster with my thread that keeps coming untied. Where did I put my, well, great. Now I can't find the needle that I was using. Fortunately, I have a huge collection of them. That's how my life always is. Lose something, find 6 more, never find the original back again. But this needle has a bigger eye, so I can do this much faster. Ha, ha, ha. Okay, so a couple more tips that I was going to show you. I am just going to move this underneath so that we're not seeing all that mess before. So starting again. Okay, sorry, I have a list and I'm trying to check it because otherwise I would totally forget. So I did tell you a couple of things about how you would make a jump stitch. Now, what I didn't really show you was that you're going to stick with the same spacing. Now I have a much bigger needle, so I have to readjust. Every time you change your fabric, your thread, or your needle, you're going to have to readjust your spacing. So you can make the same stitches. And it's really hard to see because I did such a bad job down here. But these stitches are much bigger, but it's a similar distance, smaller stitches here. If you're going around a curve, because you've got a pre-printed design or you've drawn a design, or actually here's an example. This is actually not Sashiko, this is Kanta cloth, but you may be able to see that there are circles in here. If the camera will adjust for a second, there we go. As you're going around a circle, obviously if you have a large stitch, it's going to distort the circle. So if there's a curve, then you need to make your stitches smaller and smaller based on the tightness of the curve. I'm not going to show you that. I'm not very good at it, to be honest, but hopefully you can see on here, you've got a large curve and you've got larger stitches. The smaller the curve, the tinier the stitches. That is an experience issue. That is all I can do. I mean, that's all I can tell you about that. It's something that you just have to practice. You have to get used to. You can see examples of it. If you have the pre-printed designs, this one was actually showing up pretty well on camera once it, the pre-printed designs will kind of adjust for you. So I'm not sure if you can tell just by eyeballing it, but these stitches are a little bit smaller on the inside than these big ones out on the larger curve, which is why I think it's really helpful. Maybe I'm just saying cheating, but it is kind of useful, I think, to start with some of the pre-printed ones and try to follow the size of the stitches that are on there. Do I have too much light? Maybe taking away some of the light would help. Is that going to help with this camera? No. Oh, well, y'all, I don't know how to work this technology any better. I apologize for that. But hopefully you've gotten the idea that depending on the size of the curve and the shape of the curve, you will just adjust the size of the stitches to go around the curve. Now, I'm not going to show you how to do any particular curvy patterns today because they are not my expertise at all. I like straight lines and corners. But more important things that you need to learn, and I can do this on the graph paper now. Oh, see, there was that needle that was missing. I can do this on the graph paper now, which is probably going to be easier than things constantly trying to focus and unfocus. As you're going around a curve, so I'm going to draw a curve badly with one color here. And then, yeah, that camera just keeps adjusting and readjusting. I really thought this one was going to be better than the other camera. Well, I've got to figure out the light situation. Oh, well. Your stitches to go around the curve have to be bigger. Because obviously, if you're doing big stitches and they're straight, they're not going to look, they're going to kind of stick out a little bit. You can do it. And if you're skilled, it's fine. But the bigger the stitch, the less it's actually going to curve. So I'm not sure if you can tell, but the smaller stitches can follow the tightness of that curve better. Does that explain a little bit better? I think that's going to explain better than the things that I was saying before. And hopefully, great. Hopefully, that's why I brought this graph paper. So worst case scenario, this should give you some points. Okay. Let me see what else I had on there. Oh, so another important thing. You're doing your, you have a design, and maybe your design has a big L shape in it. When you come to a corner, you are going to take your stitches up to one corner. You are not going to touch. So one stitch here should go all the way up to the corner, and then the next stitch there should be a space, and you turn that corner. And then here, again, you'll go up to the corner and then have a space. You do not want to have your stitches go this way and then touch unless that is in the pattern. There are a few rare patterns that call for that. Especially there are patterns that are called the one stitch pattern, where you're literally just doing one square here and then one square there and then one square there and one square there, and they're all meant to touch. But unless the pattern calls for it to touch, you want there to be a gap. So you want the line to go like this and then start up as after you've turned the corner. You also, if you have a star, again, quite common in the asanoha, like I'm wearing. So the way you would see it on paper, it looks something like this. That's not how you're going to stitch it. You're going to stitch it so that nothing touches in the middle. It's going to look like that when you stitch it. You're going to leave the center bit completely open. And also, there's only one pattern that I know of where it will ever cross. And that pattern is literally just a bunch of little crosses. That's all there is to that one. But generally speaking, if you have two lines and they intersect, so you've got a line going this way and a line going that way, you're not going to stitch across that intersection. You're going to leave a gap, again, just like you did on the star shape. You're going to leave a gap where the center is. And then you're going to come and go on either side. You will never see a set of lines intersect unless it's very clearly marked. And again, like I said, in these patterns, usually with little dashy lines so you can tell. If you've got these little dashy lines going like this, you want to make sure you're not stitching across any other line that's in there. So yeah, if you have a bunch of points meeting together, you want to try to keep the space between all of them fairly even. If you're turning a corner, you want to have one line go up to the corner and then keep a space after you've turned it, and don't cross over unless you've been very specifically told to. Do all those things make sense? I am going to go ahead and show you some of the drawing. Now, unfortunately, this first thing I can tell based on this camera is not going to show up. But the last traditional tool that I had to show you is this thing. It is called a Hera, H-E-R-A, the black so you can see it a little better. It is a lot like a bone folder. If you've ever done paper crafts, you know, you fold in your own cards, that type of thing. They used to be made from bone. They're not. Now they're made out of plastic. This is actually a quite sharp point on this curve. Okay. And it looks like that. Unfortunately, there is no way I can show you this on camera. This is the kind of thing that you see in person. And I even went to try to make a video for you out in the sunlight. It still didn't show up. But the point of a Hera is we don't have the pre-printed patterns. We somehow got to get the patterns onto our fabric. And maybe we've got dark fabric, maybe we've got light fabric. It really doesn't matter. But we're in the 17th century. We don't have any kind of wash away ink. We don't have the fancy stuff. What are you going to do to leave a mark on your fabric that isn't going to disappear? You actually are taking this piece of plastic, which would have been cow bone or some kind of deer bone, and you're pressing really hard on the fabric. Now, I am 100% sure you cannot see that, but I can see that very clearly. It has left a shiny impression. It is burnishing fabric such a way. See if I can bring it any closer, but again, I just know that that is not going to show up. Yeah, there's no way you can see a line there. I'm sorry. It's so subtle because there's no ink, there's no anything. It is just making the fabric a little bit shiny. And I can keep leaving row after row on this fabric so I can tell where my stitching lines are going to go. Once you wash this fabric, or even if you wanted to steam it, this will come back out again. You will not see it. You will have stitched over the line, but these lines will completely go away in the wash because, again, there's no ink. There's no anything. Oh, I'm glad that some of you could kind of see it. There's more lines. Sorry, I live with a cat, so there's cat hair and lint all over the place. But I don't know if you can see, there's a bunch of lines on the fabric now where I just ran it through. That is the traditional way of marking fabric. Sometimes the camera is putting it into focus. You can see lines barely. Yeah, unfortunately, this is the kind of thing where if I don't have the very bright lights on, I can't see it. If they don't have the bright lights on, then maybe you'd be able to see it in the camera. But honestly, most people I know have difficulty seeing it even in person. There you go. You can kind of barely see it in the camera. That is the traditional way to mark your fabric. You could do curves. You could do straight lines. The important thing to note is this has a very thin edge to it. It is rounded. You're using pressure. So you either need like a cutting mat or a piece of cardboard or something underneath your fabric. And the pressure on there is just going to make the fabric slightly shiny and a slight indentation on it. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not going to do that. I mean, I do sometimes. It shows up even less on lighter colored fabric. I could show you, but it's the same effect. It's just going to leave an indentation on there. So what are modern people going to do? Honestly, I'm going to show you on graph paper. I could have just as easily gotten out this fabric and shown you how to draw it out. What I use is a friction pen, Pilot Friction, Frixion. I'm not sure if the camera is going to let that show up. Let me let this sit there for a minute, and maybe the camera will adjust to that if I move my hands out of the way. But Pilot brand makes an entire line, Frixion. I could type it into the chat. You can get it at quilt stores, you can get it at Target, you can get it at Big Box Craft Supply, you can get it at all kinds of places. There we go. Now you can see that. They make them in ballpoint, they make them in gel pen, but what I personally like when drawing on fabric is the felt tip. Now, why do I say you should get a Pilot Friction pen? Because you want something that's going to erase. You know, here's a traditional Clover water-soluble pencil. Again, you can write on the fabric with it. Maybe you can see that line there. Now, if you have ever made garments, if you have ever done cosplay sewing or any other type of sewing, you know this stuff doesn't always wash out properly. You can get air erase ones that are supposed to disappear in 48 hours. First off, I don't stitch that fast, so 48 hours is not enough time for me. But second off, even they don't always disappear. So it depends on the fabric. You can get different colors, like you can get darker ones for lighter fabric. Obviously, the light ones are more for dark fabric. But in my experience, they don't work terribly well. Now, Pilot brand company back in the 80s, I think it was trying to invent an erasable ink. And they came up with this really weird product. And it works perfectly fine on fabric. And then with friction, which is why they gave it that name, it erases. Now, it is kind of hard to fully erase on fabric, and it is going to distort your fabric. But you know what's going to completely erase this? Heat. You put an iron on that, or you pop it in the microwave, and that line is going to go away. So I recommend this particular brand. You can use Taylor's chalk, you can use air-soluble pencils, you can use water-soluble pencils, you can use whatever you have. You know, the traditional wax chalk, anything you like. If you're used to it, you've tested it on the back of the fabric or something like that, you use anything that you have handy. No problem. But these things is what I would recommend for most people. And I have to give it a very specific caveat. So like I said, if I had my iron here, or I had a heat gun, or I popped it in the microwave, that mark would completely go away until it's about 5 degrees below freezing. Then that mark is going to come back. Then you just heat it again, it can go away. So if you are trying to do Sashiko for a purse or an accessory that you're going to wear outdoors when it's really cold, unfortunately, these pens are not particularly good for you because that mark will come back again. You can put it in the freezer again. In fact, I've heard, especially people in Texas, they're shopping at Target. They bought these and they've left them in the car, and then they go to write and they're like, my pen doesn't work. It's clear. Like I can feel there's something in it, but there's no color coming out. And people are like, you have to actually take your pens and put it in the freezer because you've got to reactivate that ink. But yeah, I find that kind of funny. Unfortunately, they did discover the side effect was that it doesn't stay permanently gone. But, you know, I think it's better than nothing. And in Texas, you don't have to worry about it a whole lot. So I think that was all. Okay, no. So let me talk about your other options very briefly. And basically what I'm going to say is you can use any other embroidery transfer methods. You can use the carbon paper. You can use the transfer pens that you might use for other embroidery patterns. You can get quilting templates that are made out of plastic where you just have the little holes to stitch through. They're already cut out. They're like acrylic or, you know, sometimes thick plastic. They're meant for if you're hand quilting and you're just going to draw your little lines on there. All the type of stuff that you would normally use for putting your quilt designs on or embroidery transfer, you can use that in Sashiko. Absolutely. That's fine. And if that's what you're comfortable with, 100% go ahead and do that. You can use tearaway stabilizer. That's usually used for machine embroidery, but if you want to draw it out on something that's kind of paper-like first, you can draw it on tearaway stabilizer, lay that on top of your fabric, stitch through it, and then tear the whole paper off when you finished, and then there won't be any markings left on your paper. But my general preference is to take your fabric, take some of these friction pens by Pilot. Again, brush pen is much easier, felt tip pen is much easier to use on fabric. You can also buy the ballpoint pens, gel pens, whatever is comfortable for you is perfectly fine. I am going to recommend, and especially because the camera seems to like the paper better, I am just going to do it on graph paper first. I'm not going to try to do it on fabric because we're going to be finishing up here. But you would do the same thing if you're doing it directly on your paper. So don't worry about that. Or sorry, if you're doing it directly on your fabric, don't worry about that. I'm just going to do it on graph paper. So we're going to draw out a quick design. And once we have finished that, that's going to be it for the night. I will have shown you how to draw a design. You will have learned how to stitch. You can put together your entire project after this. So you may, if you're working with a particularly loose piece of fabric, you may want a weight to hold it down. Some people will tape it onto the table just to keep it stable. This is, again, from Daiso. It is a calligraphy weight. It was $1. It's very heavy, and it's definitely going to hold this whole stack of paper down. I don't have to worry about it. I also don't even have to worry about my cat coming and knocking everything off the table because that is really secure at that point. You're then going to get your ruler. And I would say, I mean, most Sashiko patterns are meant to be done in metric measurements because the United States is the only place on the planet that still uses imperial measurements. If you don't know what imperial is, that's inches. Metric is centimeters. And so I did say bring a ruler, and I can imagine maybe one or two of you has an OmniGrid ruler. And then you're going, wait, there's no metric on that. Yeah, I'd totally forgotten that too. I don't know why OmniGrid, why you are re-exporting the imperial system back out to the rest of the world because quilters use inches and quarter inches in particular. But OmniGrid, because it's made for quilters, only has inches on it. You notice Olfa has both. Go Team Olfa, love them. But if you have an OmniGrid ruler, it's still kind of helpful because it has the angle markings. You may want that for future patterns. So don't throw it out. Don't discount it. I mean, I'm sure you wouldn't throw it out because if you bought it, you'd bought it for other purposes. But for today, I am just going to recommend that you get a plain regular ruler. This one has markings on it. I'm not even going to use those. I'm going to use the lines on the grid paper. Now, most Sashiko designs will have a boundary drawn on the outside first. So this is just literally making a box. It can be a square, rectangle, whatever you want to do. Really doesn't matter. Whatever your piece of paper looks like. Sometimes you can do this afterwards. Because if you've got a particular shape that you're going for, or maybe your pattern winds up in a certain size, I probably should have done this after I drew out the pattern on the inside. Again, just because I can't show you this, I can show you that you really can just erase with friction. This is not an eraser, that's just a piece of plastic. And that doesn't work so well in fabric, but that is what a friction pen is meant to do. Now again, I told you when I was young, I didn't like doodling cute things. I couldn't draw anything representational to save my life, even flowers that just look terrible. So I used to draw what I call square spirals. There's actually a fancy name for that. In Japanese, this is called a raimon, and that basically means lightning. I have no idea why lightning goes in spirals in Japan, but it does. So this is basically, you would normally do this in like a 1 centimeter increment. So 1 centimeter from wherever you had your line. In this case, because I'm using graph paper, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to use 2 squares. That is approximately 1 centimeter. If you only have imperial measurements, go ahead and use a 1/2 inch. That's probably going to be the easiest for you to see. So I'm measuring 2 squares in from that side and 2 squares in from that side. And I'm going up here. I'm stopping 2 squares from the end. And I'm going to turn. Again, we're staying 2 squares away from that edge. And I'm stopping 2 squares away from that edge. Coming down. That edge was pretty wonky, so we'll just ignore that for now. Coming in again. And I'm going to stop 2 squares before this ends. By the way I'm drawing it is the way that is recommended to stitch. Some of you who are familiar with other types of embroidery may have been told you always start from the center of your design and work out, because that helps prevent puckering when you're in a hoop. We don't have to worry about that with Sashiko because we don't have a hoop, and we're always going to be adjusting our spacing and tension as we go along. So again, coming down here, we're going to stop 2 centimeters or 2 squares before the end, roughly, because I'm not the best at paying attention and talking at the same time. And if you keep going, you will wind up with what I call, like I said, a squared spiral, a block spiral. You could have done this in a square. You could have started in the middle. Oops, see, I went too far. That's why I like having an erasable pen. You could have started in the center and worked your way out. It honestly doesn't make that much difference. Oh, that's what happened. I was completely in the wrong line. I will say that one thing I do not like about having a hera is that if you do make a mistake like this with a hera, it's really hard to completely fix that. I'm not entirely sure. Oh no, that line was correct. Huh? I don't know how to fix the mistake accurately with the hera. Now I don't even know where I am. Oh well. Because I've made a mistake somewhere earlier. I should go back and correct it. But you guys are tired and I'm tired. And I think you're getting the idea. Now, one thing that I do need to note is that all of these patterns that you see can be what they call distorted. You can stretch them out. You can shrink them up. You can squish them down. You can suddenly decide that you want to go 4 squares in, or you wanted to go 4 squares in all the time because it's faster. You can make adjustments however you like. Some people would stop before they've gotten all the way to the inside. If you decided that you liked it 5 squares apart, that's fine. If you wanted this to be truly a square instead of a rectangle, that's also fine. Now, I have made a complete hash of this because I don't know where that line went. That's the one that I screwed up somehow, and then it went, I don't know what I did. But we're not going to worry about that because you guys have the general gist of this, right? I think I have done as much damage in showing you the very, very, very basics of Sashiko as I can. So maybe if we can switch to the front-facing camera, let's see if I can do that without, whoops, muting myself is kind of a problem. Let's see if I can switch to the front-facing camera, move the top camera off. Thank you guys for staying with us. I appreciate all of you who are still here. Obviously tonight was not my best night, but that is okay. Sashiko is, to me, a very diverse and beautiful geometric patterning. Hopefully you can see my shirt a little bit better now that I'm in the full screen. You can do things as complex or simple as you like. You can do straight lines. You can do checks. You can do lines of different colors. So some of the little tips and other things that I wanted to sort of give you a heads up on. Remember, as you're figuring out how you want to do your stitching, keep in mind when you might want to change colors or when you're going to run out of thread. I didn't show you the best way to not use a knot on the back, and that is something that I really should show you. But to be honest, it's not recommended. If you're doing something that's two-sided, do you guys want to see that or not? Do you guys want to see how to do it without a knot in the back? Because it's quite simple. If you start from where you're first starting, instead of stitching right to left, if you're going right to left, you would start about 3 stitches in from where you want to go. You're going to go backwards for 3 stitches, then turn around and come forwards again, back to the same stitches you were just in. That is going to help lock it in the fabric a little bit. However, that is not super secure. That is what was done for a double-sided piece of fabric, which is usually only done for furoshiki. Now, we will be talking about furoshiki in December, which is a way to wrap your presents and give gifts using fabric instead of wrapping paper. But generally speaking, it's not as secure as tying a knot. So unless you really need a double-sided piece of fabric, I would not recommend that. If you are a perfectionist and you just have to do it, drop me a line. I can show you some. There's several other videos on the internet about how to do that. But yeah, I'm just looking, kind of forgot to hit that one. But certainly every time you're changing thread, you've got to do that. And it does show as a doubled thread on the front surface. There, again, are some ways you can kind of interlock, but that's going to show in the back too. That's not going to give you a true reversible fabric. So it will be a reversible fabric, but then there's still going to be these little flaws and flubs throughout your design every time you're changing color or you're changing into another piece of floss. So it's kind of up to you whether you want to go with that or not. Again, remember, usually a good reference book will have told you how you want to do the stitching lines. If it tells you nothing, then you just need to find the longest possible route through the path. I don't have a specific answer for that. Every pattern, you just kind of have to look at it and try to figure out, well, how far can I go with my thread? If you look at certain patterns, enough patterns that have the little arrows on them, you will start to see how those thought processes work. There's no right answer. There's no silver bullet. Every pattern will have a slightly different answer to it. And also, if you're changing colors in the middle of the pattern, that'll change up how you want to stitch it. So if they haven't given you any particular arrow diagram, then it's kind of up to you how you want to do it, whatever's comfortable for you. So that, I think, is all of the Sashiko tips that I can show you tonight. It has been a long 2 hours already. I thank you so much for being with me. Remember that our next Make Your Monday is going to be November 9th, where we're going to put all of the stitching to work, invisible mending. So gather up your jeans with holes in them, your t-shirt where maybe you got a hole in it somewhere, a stuffed toy that maybe has a little bare patch in his tummy, any of those types of things, and we will look at ways that we can fix them with leaving the stitching visible and pretty for you. And again, if Boro and like Americans' fascination with Bio and Boro is something that you're interested in, remember September 27th at 2 p.m. Central Time. It'll be time for Akashikan Presents Japan Stories, where I will be taking you on a tour of some of my favorite flea markets, farmers markets, and temple sales. For some reason, temples are where a lot of what we call flea markets are located. So you can get some amazing bargains there. And do check out the rest of Akashikan online activities throughout the rest of the month. I really appreciate you guys. Thanks so much for sticking with me. If you guys have any more comments afterwards, you can leave a message in the chat. You can contact me. I'm available on the Akashikan Facebook groups, or if you leave a message on our Instagram, any of the Akashikan social media, eventually will get back to me. And also, again, Julianne in Japan or Twinsugi@gmail.com will get to me. So thank you so much. I hope that you were learning throughout these processes. And I will be a better host next time. I will be awake next time. But thank you very, very much. Have a fantastic week and have a safe rest of September. Good night, everybody.